right, I'm going to record our political structures notes here so that you can watch it this evening and take notes over it. And I think this will just go better in video form than having to go through all of this in class. We got in class today, we were looking at the three hierarchies. So as I was kind of saying, the political structure of China is three parallel systems, including the Communist Party, then the actual government, and then also the military, or the People's Liberation Army. We're going to start with the party. These are separate arms of the structure, but they all interact with one another, meaning the party oversees all of them. So today in class, what I wanted you to do that we didn't really get to was to look at these positions in the Communist Party. So I'll quickly go through them, and then I want you to use those documents on Canvas to go through them a little bit more. But you can see that at the head is the General Secretary, so this would be Xi Jinping. The General Secretary, the Standing Committee, and the Politburo are obviously the most prominent members, most prominent groups of the Communist Party, and they make most of the decisions. And they also oversee the president of the government is Xi Jinping. It's the same position. They're used interchangeably. And then there is a premier who is second in command, the second highest person in the Communist Party. The party also oversees the military, which is why we read in that article, if the military were to suddenly become depoliticized and stop following the commands of the Communist Party, it would be very dangerous for the party's rule. So the party is based on something called democratic centralism. So it's the idea that society is best led by an elite vanguard party with a superior understanding of the Chinese people and their needs. So elite meaning it's selective. Goes back to the meritocracy. Only the best can be part of the party. It was the early 2000s when capitalists were allowed to become members of the party. And obviously understanding what the Chinese people need and understanding Chinese tradition is essential to their continued leadership. It is hierarchical. It begins at the village and township level, and you can work your way up in the system from the village, township, to the county, then to the province, one of those 23 provinces, and finally to the nation as a whole. And as we mentioned on the previous slide, the head of the party is the General Secretary. There is a National Party Congress and a National People's Congress. They are different. The National Party Congress has 2,000 delegates, roughly. They only meet once every 5 years, and much like the National People's Congress, they are a rubber stamp where they look at the decisions that the party leadership is making and sort of formally approve them, although they're not going to challenge party leadership. And they also are the ones who choose the members of the Central Committee. So there's a system in China where members of various bodies are chosen by the entity immediately below them in the hierarchy. The Central Committee, which is if we're moving up in the hierarchy, next we get to the Central Committee. It has about 340 members who are chosen for 5-year terms. They're voted in by secret ballot, and the candidates are chosen by the party leadership. So this is one of those things that's selective based on how well you're performing for the party. They do meet every year in an event called the plenum, and they are the ones who carry out all the business of the National Party Congress between sessions. So if the National Party Congress has some sort of agenda, the Central Committee will carry it out when those 2,000 members are not meeting. The Politburo then is above the Central Committee. It has about 25 members, and they're selected by the Central Committee themselves. They have even more discretion and more decision-making power within the party. We read in the article about the myths of Chinese communism, how the party is pretty secretive. The Politburo does meet in secret, meaning their meetings are not announced. The location is not announced. There's not signage saying the Politburo is meeting now, or, there's obviously no television in the meetings. There's nothing that makes these meetings public. Those 25 members choose the Standing Committee, and these are 7 people. So again, we're just moving up the hierarchy here. The Standing Committee is the most powerful political organization in China. The General Secretary is the head of the Standing Committee. And it says the membership is a mirror of faction influence. I will talk about that tomorrow. That will not be in this video. The general secretary is chosen from among that standing committee. It's the head of the party. They are technocrats, meaning they've been educated in the ways of the party. They have technical, bureaucratic government experience. They've been trained in how to be a political leader. Most leaders in the Communist Party today are technocrats. Ever since Deng Xiaoping, that has been the tradition. The Guangxi, this means connections. It's basically like the good old boys club if you were thinking about this in Western terms. So it's referring to connections or relationships. We might think of it as patronage. So this refers to personal ties and connections between individuals based on, where you're born or who you know. It reminds me of the St. Louis, where'd you go to high school? This idea that we've got some commonalities and we've got things to talk about simply based on something in our past. And Guangxi, these connections are really key to getting things done, meaning if you want to get a policy passed, if you want to be influential in the party, you have to know somebody, which is not always the best system. Certainly you can't outlaw something like this. This is the way, we could argue this is the way the world works everywhere, that it's not about what you know, but who you know. So it's a way to get around the red tape or to get around some of the policies that are in place. But certainly it can feed corruption if we're having people put into positions based upon their connections and not about their merit. So in class, and I'll ask you guys this tomorrow, although I'm going to give you the answer, why is the possibility for corruption great under this system of governing? Well, the Guangxi plays a big role in this, and the reason why is because there's a lack of transparency. All of these positions are chosen through secret ballot. The meetings are secret. There's no checks on the party's power or on the government's power. In the existence of this connection system where you can move up by knowing people in high places. Next, we move into sort of the second component, the second parallel structure here, the state or the government. So we're going to talk a little bit about what each of these entities is responsible for. So technically there are three branches, right? We've got the executive, we've got the legislative and the judicial, but all of them are controlled by the party. So they're not independent. There's no system of checks and balances. The head of state is the president. Most recently, the general secretary and the president are the same person, although they don't have to be, but obviously there's not going to be any change to that in the foreseeable future. This is outdated. I left this up here just for, humor's sake. They serve 5-year terms. They're limited to 2. That's what it was. And President Xi Jinping did not bring about any proposal for someone to succeed him. He wasn't training anybody in the public eye to succeed him, and so very obviously, he's now changed the rules and changed the Constitution, and the National People's Congress approved that. So these are the people who, the head of state is it's usually a senior party leader or the same person as the general secretary. We also have a head of government who is the premier. It's Lei Keqiang, and they are formally chosen by the president. They're always someone who's in the standing committee, so this is the second highest position in the Communist Party. They direct something called the State Council, which is like a cabinet made up of all the people who direct the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is enormous. It's made up of millions of people who work in everything from the postal service, the military, trade union. I mean, it's massive. So it's immense in size and scope. It's made up of something called cadres. There are 30 million cadres in China. And this is just someone who exercises positions of authority in communist government. And the Communist Party is involved in every aspect of business and every aspect of, obviously, every aspect of government. So people who are in the cadres may or may not be official party members. And now they're forced to retire between the ages of 60 and 67. The cadres produce the list, the nomenclatura, that is their system of choosing cadres from the lower levels of the party hierarchy for advancement based on how well they're contributing to the party. So the bureaucracy has a dual role. It's supervised by higher bodies in the government and also by the party itself. So people in both of those structures, both of those parallel hierarchies within the system will oversee the bureaucracy. The legislature is the National People's Congress. We've been talking a little bit about this. They're very much a formal authority. They're intended, on paper to rule on the people's behalf. They don't actually have any decision-making power. On paper, they have the power to approve the budget, to make laws. None of that actually exists. They simply rubber stamp what the party agenda is. So there are about 3,000 members called deputies who serve 5-year terms. This came up in our first period class, and they are chosen not by direct election. So I looked more into this. They're chosen by the lower levels of the legislature. So at the lowest level of government is at sort of the village township level. People in that level are elected by people in the village. So people have the ability to vote for local government, and all the candidates that they choose from are chosen by the party. From there, the higher levels of the legislature are chosen by the bodies themselves. Kind of like how in the U.S. history, our state legislatures used to choose our senators to represent us in the U.S. Senate. They technically choose the president and the vice president, but there's only one candidate, so it's not a competitive election. And they're the ones who sort of formally announce the policies that the Politburo is putting forward. The judiciary is called the People's Court System. It sounds like it would be so fair. And actually, there are more instances where the courts are resolving civil disputes. They're resolving issues between, laborers and management. So that is happening more, but I did mention that the judiciary is really, really harsh. On paper, they've got rule of law today. It's acknowledged because of business liberalization. You have to have rule of law. You have to hold businesses accountable to regulations and ensure that workers have some means of retribution and if there are grievances in the workplace. But again, the system is incredibly harsh. The party tends to use the judicial system as a weapon to punish people who disagree with them. The criminal justice system works very quickly. It has a 99% conviction rate, so good luck to you if you are accused of a crime in China. And I think I mentioned in first period at least that they're the world leader in the use of the death penalty per capita. The People's Liberation Army, it came up in that article we read. So Mao Zedong had said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Our principle is that the party commands the gun, and the gun must never be allowed to command the party. So again, referring to this fear that if the military were ever to turn against the Communist Party, that could be very dangerous for the party's continued power. But as of now, the People's Liberation Army is very much under the control of the party. Okay, so right now they are the world's largest military force. There are 2.3 million active personnel in the Army, including ground, air, naval, armed forces. Their key organization that we care about in terms of structure is the Central Military Commission. I don't really need you to know that they have 12 members that include 10 high-ranking officers and that the chair, looks like I cut that off, and that the chair is the commander-in-chief. So I just need you to know the name of the People's Liberation Army organization and that it's controlled by the party itself. That will be sufficient. If you would like to look more into the operations of the Army, I would be thrilled if you would share that in class. But for our purposes, that's really kind of the extent of what we're going to look at, is you need to know that it's controlled by the Communist Party. And this is from last year, and we are not doing that. So that is the end of our notes. I apologize for the quick nature of this video, but I'm sure you won't mind. And go back if you need to and take some notes on it. Fill out that chart for tomorrow so that we can compare what's going on in this structure to what exists in Russia and the UK. And just FYI, our China test is next Wednesday before Easter. Have a great evening.